the discussions we're doing? Okay, technology permitting, let's get started. Remember, the mission of the Great Falls International Airport is to optimize transportation services and development in our region. And as we know this month, that's time.
Vince, you're still on mute, so we're hearing you very lightly through John's mic, but not through yours.
Right, and that's kind of what we wanted to do. We'll either have to mute his or mine. I can move it closer to me if you can't hear it.
No, just leave John's. The John's can be open all the time. Yours, you just mute yours when you're not talking. That's all we need.
Well, then he's got to mute because we'll hit, let me see.
I think he's right.
I think we're going to get some serious feedback there. Test.
Put it closer right in there.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. John, are you getting yours?
No, we can hear it twice. Well, can you guys hear me now? How's that sound? All right.
You're good right now.
I'll just talk louder. So when I'm not looking at my computer, it's because I'm looking at John's computer. In fact, I'll turn my screen on, and then you guys won't be confused. But I can see you guys.
Back this up.
Oh, you're good.
Well, I'm just like, try to maintain our 6 feet here.
All right. Okay, so moving on. Technology is a wonderful thing. Now, welcome, and please remember that the board appreciates public participation from the public. If you have any comments throughout the board meeting, I would say please stand, but that'd be kind of a moot point right now. So just kind of wave your hand or make a note, and we will make sure that your comments are heard. With the quorum of the board present, I call the meeting to order. Roll call. Commissioner Eretz. Can you hear us, Tony? You're on mute. We can't hear you.
I am here.
There you go. Commissioner Eretz is present. Commissioner Bakke is present. Commissioner Evans.
Present.
Commissioner Gibbs.
Present.
Commissioner Lalonde.
Present.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
And Commissioner Timbo.
Here.
With all board members present, let's stand for a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, our first order of business is the consent agenda. The consent agenda is made up of routine day-to-day items that require board action but not appear to have significant public impact. Items may be pulled from the consent agenda for separate discussion/vote by any board member. And today's consent agenda is A, approval of board meeting minutes from April. B, Finance Committee meeting minutes from May 8th, 2020. C, payroll checks totaling $94,144.72. D, maintenance and operating checks number 25359 to 25425 totaling $582,297.46. E, approve the passenger facility charge totaling $55,000. And F, financial reports for April. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Yes, okay. And a second.
I'll second.
Okay. I have a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda as...
Vince,
Yes.
call me through the motion and the second. Please.
Oh. Did you say we need a
You
discussion?
need to say who it is.
We just need to know who it was.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Todd made the motion.
Todd made the motion and Rich seconded.
Thank you.
No problem. And is there any discussion? Okay, with no discussion, let's have a vote to accept the consent agenda as read. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed with nay? All right, Laura, the consent agenda passes unanimously. All right, we'll move on to the director's report.
Yes, thanks, and happy May, everyone. the first thing I was just going to mention is our traffic, as Vince and I were talking beforehand, is down about 90% right now. That is up substantially from where it was in the last month, and so we're seeing almost a doubling of our traffic day over day, which is still not a good number, but obviously a healthier number than it was at the onset a month ago. Currently, we have one daily flight from Alaska Airlines that is operating between here and Seattle. That flight's being shared with Billings. We have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday Denver flight that we share with Helena. And then we have a daily Delta that operates every day except to Salt Lake every day except for Tuesday and Sunday. And so they don't have that flight in place then. There's discussion that we may, in July, return to a heavier schedule. Right now, the airlines are not really changing the schedule more than a month out, so we really don't see what's going to happen in July right now. But what we've heard discussed is that Minneapolis may return. I think it's likely we would share that flight with a Kalispell potentially, or potentially Billings on the way out of the state. And so there's some discussion that may return. We expect that we'll probably get back to a daily Salt Lake flight in July, and currently the schedule shows the Chicago flight in July, but I suspect that'll be canceled. But in any event, we are hearing some commentary from the airlines, notably Delta and Southwest, who said they've cut too much system capacity in July. So they're expecting to actually add flights back in the overall system in that July timeframe because they are seeing some advanced bookings starting to fill in. So that's good news. That would point towards a potential upswing, which obviously we're all anxious to see. We are hoping to continue to have our airline conference in September. September 14th through the 16th, the airlines were scheduled to be here in Great Falls to partake in the Montana Rendezvous. This will be the third year that conference has occurred, and we were to be the host this year. We're still hoping to have that happen, and we'll be sending some materials out to the airlines in the next week to remind them of those dates and also give them a formal agenda of schedule of events. And so one of the things we've decided to do is to extend the offer to allow families to come in the September timeframe. Then they would come out on Saturday, and we've got events planned for Sunday that are intended to be for families. In the event that some of these folks in the bigger cities like Chicago may not get a summer vacation, may not be a whole lot to do as they continue to struggle with lockdowns. And so we're hoping that maybe some folks would like to come out early and partake in some of those activities and give us an opportunity to recreate with some of the airline representative families. So that's our plan. We'll start that conference, those activities on the 14th, which is a Sunday, and offer some activities to the airlines those days. We are going to try to go ahead and get those notices out so we can get RSVPs back, hopefully in the next month, and know how many people we're planning for, and then get everything pulled together real quick and still have this conference in September. We are receiving a lot of questions about that from the other airports who are very anxious to talk to the airlines again. So certainly the other airports in the state would like to see us try to get this event back on the calendar. So we will endeavor to do that. The other thing I was going to update everybody on, I'll pass around a sheet for those of you that are here regarding our CARES funding. We have received the CARES dollars through our normal, what we call Delphi system, which is essentially what happens is the grants get programmed by the FAA and they set in a Delphi account which allows electronic transfer to our bank. And as we have invoices to pay, we submit those invoices into the Delphi system, and we receive reimbursement for those. And so we have received the majority of our CARES funding. We'll receive about, well, as it says here on the sheet, $3,960,216 in our CARES allotment. And we've, on the sheet, kind of described what all we'll be paying for with that. Just on Friday, the electronic transfer was prepped for our debt service reimbursement. As the sheet here shows, we'll be paying off 3 sets of bonds that we have outstanding. One is a little bit of debt we took out when we did the first phase of the snow building back about, oh gosh, it's been 2014, I guess. We took out a little bit of debt because that was an eligible tax exempt expense, and that actually helped us to create some liquidity so we could buy our first loading bridge in the loading bridge program, which we put on the United Gate back in that time frame. We have about $290,800 outstanding on that bond, which we paid out hopefully in the next week to the next month, depending on when we can set up the transfers with Wells Fargo. We also have the apron debt from when the terminal apron was constructed. There's about $597,850 outstanding on that bond that will be paid off. That's the terminal pavement behind there. That was, I believe, done last in 2008. And then we have the 2003 terminal remodel. That was the addition that added the 3rd floor upstairs. I believe the skylight was also in that remodel and some other miscellaneous improvements to the terminal. There's about $1,224,904 outstanding on that bond that we'll be paying out. By reducing all the debt that we have outstanding, this will allow us to subsidize the airline rates with our surplus dollars. The way the airline rates and charges work is we basically we accumulate all of our costs, we deduct all the passenger revenues and leasing revenues that we have, and then what's left over in need is charged to the airlines. And so when we eliminate debt as we are, this creates a reduction in what we need to charge the airlines in order to keep ourselves whole. And so getting rid of these 3 different bonds will help us to lower the airline rates for the foreseeable future. And so this has been a long-term goal. I think many of you probably heard me talk about it a number of times, that we had targeted being debt-free in the next 2 to 3 years anyway. And now that we have these resources, that's the first thing we want to do is to try and get rid of that debt so that we can reduce our airline rates. And when I say reduce our airline rates, obviously we have the same operating expenses that we've always had. And because the operating expenses are somewhat stable and the revenue has gone down from other sources, our airline rates would normally shoot up because there's less activity to divide our need over. So for instance, in the airfield, we divide everything by the landed weight that we have out there, and that's our landing fee. Obviously, with only 3 flights on a busy day now, we have a lot less landed weight. FedEx makes up about half our landed weight, so that portion has not changed a great deal, but the other portion is suffering pretty dramatically. And so as we pull costs out of the airline cost centers, with the activity lower, what that allows us to do is maintain rates at or below where we were prior to COVID without having a rate shock. And that's really a word you're hearing a lot around the industry right now, is all the airports trying to avoid a rate shock, where the cash drawer is so miserably bad that you have to go out and charge the airlines a lot of money in order to cover the airport's costs. We are confident in the budget that we'll talk about a little later on. We can hold the rates pretty much where they were by eliminating some of these costs. And so the next expense we'll be paying for on the SCASD list here is we're going to recover the cost of our tank farm remediation. Many of you may recall last fall we remediated the old tank farm for a cost of about $111,000. And the airlines would normally pay us that back through the landing fee, but we want to avoid additional capital costs right now to the airlines. And so what we'll be doing there is we'll be submitting operating expenses through the FAA system. We've got a bill, for instance, of about $15,000 to repair the ceiling over the stairwell that was damaged by a storm this last winter. We have a $30,000 annual maintenance on our escalators and elevators. And then we plan to pay about $65,000 in payroll, and added together we'll accumulate that $111,000, and then we'll just deduct that cost that we would normally charge the airlines from the airline rates model. So That'll be about $111,000 of our cost right there. We also plan next year to pay another operating cost expense of about $100,000. We'll probably do that near the end of the year, depending on how activity's going. That would probably be a payroll plus big expenses at the end of next year in order to keep the rates down. So we'll pay about $100,000 in operating costs in the next fiscal year near the end to help keep the rates down for next year. If activity returns faster than we think it will, that payment would not be necessary, and so we'll just use that CARES money for something else next spring. But we do plan right now, we take about $100,000 of operating costs and pay it directly from CARES, which they allow us to do. We have a loading bridge expense on the next line item of about $360,393. That loading bridge was bought about a year ago. We put in service a new loading bridge for Alaska Airlines so that they could have a jet begin serving our airport. And their policy across their system was that they wanted loading bridges. Unfortunately, at most of us here in Montana, they had long been serving us with Q400s, and they didn't want to use loading bridges. So most of us had assigned them to gates without loading bridges, and nearly overnight they asked us to get a loading bridge in place. And so we did go out and spend about $390,000. The way the loading bridge costs work is over the last, it's been about 10 years now, we've added 3 new loading bridges to the building. And as we add those in, they go into a cost center, and then we deduct from that a charge to the non-signatory airline Allegiant, and that they pay every time they use the airport, and then everyone else divides those costs equally. And so it's its own cost center, and there's 3 loading bridges in it. So they pay about $1,500 a month to rent a loading bridge from us. We want to reduce that cost in the long term. And so what we've chosen to do is we're going to submit payroll and other operating expenses through the CARES system for about $360,393. That's the unamortized cost of that bridge. When we add those bridges in, we charge the airlines for 20 years at an interest rate of about 3% for those bridges. We're going to refund ourselves for that bridge and take that out of the airline cost center because, again, what we want to do is lower the airline costs, and then we'll recover our capital from SCASD for that bridge. And so this will allow us to drop that rate pretty substantially going forward and help us to lower our airline cost per enplanement. We also plan to begin the design work on phase 3 of the roadways. The phase 3 portion is the portion from the water tower all the way out to I-15. As you know, at any week here, we're going to have the groundbreaking of Love's as they start to build their operation out here on the corner. That will include 3 cut-ins to the road and several utility crossings. So there'll be quite a bit of surgery done to that road over the next year and a half as they get their work done over there. Once we get that done, we want to have that road repaved. It's due in the program anyway, but once they get done with that, we'll want to repave it. We also want to adjust that road to whatever changes the Guard has to their new entry gate that they want to build. And so we'll be looking for design inputs from them so that we have that road ready to go with their gate improvements. And so that whole package, we want to start the design of that now in the event that there's an infrastructure package, a federal infrastructure package, which is most parties are talking about right now. There being some type of infrastructure bill next year. We want to have a project that's ready to go on the shelf that could get that kind of funding. So we will have both our roadway ready to go and we'll have our de-icing ramp ready to go. In my opinion, it is more likely that we would get funding for the de-icing ramp. We're starting the design on that now. It was approved by the board several months ago. And but then we'll have our entitlement dollars that would normally come in, which we'll need to spend also. And so we want to have 2 projects that are there in the event that there's extra funding that flows through at the end of next year. In addition, there's some mixed reports that some airports may not be proceeding with projects they plan to proceed with because of the COVID downturn. Terminal projects in particular, some of that money is getting turned back. When there's extra money at the year end, there's also the opportunity for a discretionary grant. And so we want to be lined up with projects that are ready to bid so that if there is extra money at the end of the year, we can be in line for that discretionary grant. And so having two projects, one for our normal funding and one for the extra funding that might come about, is the way to go. In addition, as we've said many times, that phase 3 of the roadway project will have an ineligible component. The component that is ineligible is any part of that road that is not exclusively airport use. So there's that tiny stick of road that serves the Swanson properties, that serves the Skyline Bar, and several other landowners that are down in that area. That first couple hundred yards is ineligible, and so we'll have to find a way to pay for that. By putting the design money out there now and getting that project designed, when it comes time to receive our normal grant, we'll be able to refund ourselves for the eligible design, and then we'll have that extra cash kind of stored there that we can use to pay for those ineligible projects. And so by getting the design out there now, we're sort of taking some of that CARES money and setting it aside because we know we have an ineligible portion of this project. We expect that to be about $300,000. We'll again submit payroll and other operating costs for that cost. The reason we're doing that is if we use CARES dollars directly, then we won't be able to reimburse ourselves with AIP dollars, Airport Improvement Fund dollars. If we use operating expenses and payroll to submit to CARES in the amount of that design money, we'll be able to submit a reimbursement request from FAA and recover those dollars out of our grant, which then the dollars we recover, we will then turn around and use for ineligible portions of the project. So we're sort of planning ahead and using some of this CARES money ahead to offset that ineligible cost, which we would normally, again, charge the airlines, but we do expect a 2 or 3 year recovery, and those are the kinds of expenses we want to pull those roadblocks out of the way in order to keep our rates as reasonable as possible over that recovery period. So that's that $300,000 there. And then we have just a number of smaller projects that we'll be recovering from CARES. The operating budget, which the board will hear today, has a security truck replacement in it for $55,000. We plan to recover that through our CARES grant. That's every 3 or 4 years we buy a new security truck because that truck orbits the airport several times per day, checking the security fence, and so it accumulates miles very quickly. So by the time it gets to $80,000 or $90,000, we pull it out of that rotation, 80 or 90,000 miles. We pull it out of that rotation and put that into our maintenance fleet where it lasts for another 10 or 15 years. In fact, the truck we're getting rid of is a 98. So it accumulates very few miles when our maintenance guys drive it because they don't go very far. And then we put a new truck on the orbiting path, and then a few years later we do it all over again. So this is our year to buy a security truck, and we'll get that money from our CARES. We also plan to buy the used broom from Des Moines that the board approved, I believe back in January. That's a piece of equipment that it's a great addition to us. For them, they consider it older equipment. They buy a huge fleet of equipment every so many years. This one is newer than any broom we have, and about half the time of any broom we have. So for us, it'll be a frontline piece of equipment. About $90,000 will be used from CARES to purchase that equipment. Rod's working right now on getting that shipped out so that we can get that broom in place and get trained on it. Fortunately, because the Des Moines folks bought their new equipment from MD Brooms, MD is actually going to send a representative from the factory out to train us on the used piece of equipment. They took it in trade, and so as part of that, they're including the training in the price. So we'll get some firsthand training on that equipment when it arrives later this summer. We'll be recovering the local share of our 2019 project. The fog seal of the runway. We had some invoices that were in our project closeout that we were able to pay that allows us to recover $162,000 from CARES. The deadline for CARES is January 20th, so we can't submit any expenses prior to January 20th. We had some closeout invoices coming through in late January that allows us to recover our local share of that project. Again, the airlines would be paying us for that through their landing fees this year, but because there isn't any landed weight in the last quarter of the year, we'll be able to recover that cost and thus recoup that amount of activity that's lost without a rate spike at the end of the year with the loading the landing fee. We also have on here the bathroom project, which we'll talk about later in the capital, in the board meeting. It's a capital expense, about $500,000 to renovate the remaining bathrooms in the building. I'll leave that discussion for later, but that's, we're gonna recover that from our CARES dollars if it's approved by the board. And then we have the roof leak, which is also on the board agenda. We have over the admin offices, the ballast weights that hold the rubber roof down were blown over in those high winds back, I think it was probably January, and they cut into the roof. And so we have 3 or 4 leaks in the membrane roof now that our guys have tried to repair, have been unable. And so we want to replace that portion of the roof. It's on the southwest corner of the building. It's actually the largest square of roof. The other parts are cut into very small sections. We had planned on replacing the whole roof as part of the terminal refresh several years down the road. This will give us a head start on that. That's about it. We expect $160,000 that we expect to come out of CARES. That leaves us with just about $8,000 that we don't have a place for. Obviously, we can submit operating expenses at any time to recover that. This is more of a planning document at this point. As we get the debt paid off and we begin to submit some of these other costs, like the $100,000 we're planning for next year to reduce the landing fee, we'll hold on to that. So we plan to hold about $110,000 through most of the fiscal year. If we have continued downturns and we need to submit more operating expenses to help balance the rates, we'll be able to use that. Are there any questions on that CARES discussion? Most of these items, as I said, are coming up to the board individually as approvals for capital costs and that type of thing.
So overall, it sounds like, I mean, with this CARES money, we come out okay. I mean, all things being equal, when you look at Great Falls Airport Authority, I mean, some of our things on our wish list and we're figuring out how to pay, you know, at least in the short run and through. So when you say 2021 on this, that's through June 30th, 21 is kind of that budget period of what we're doing. Is there how long could we go with these? I mean, you said January, whatever was the start, and then is it?
The rules are changing literally every day. The FAA has added new rules even last week, but they added one, I believe it was last week, that we have to spend this within 3 years.
Okay.
And so, but that's only on the operating cost ones. They're struggling with the idea of 2 pools of funding within your funds. You have to have there's an operating pool which you can use for salaries, for paying bills, anything like that. Then they have a second pool of your dollars, which they're calling development funds, and that's for new projects. And I understand their dilemma. They want to ensure that you do your NEPA process, that it's on your airport layout plan, your approved FAA plan, that you followed all of the processes before you spend those dollars, all the federal required processes, and you bid it just like you would any federal funded project. And so what I was trying to explain to them from the onset is, yes, I understand what you're doing, but I have a lot of expenses that are in between where I'm trying to pay, for instance, my local share of the project that I did last year. It had NEPA done, it had, you know, all these other things done. And so yes, it's a development expense to the extent that I'm building something or I'm acquiring a broom. And so normally there would be NEPA process. However, that's already been done. And so it took some time to kind of work that discussion through, because I mean, we're all catching fallen knives right now. We finally got through last week, kind of a breakthrough moment where they said, okay, you know, all of your vehicle purchases, all of the projects that have already been NEPA vetted and are on the ALP, those things are operating costs, and development costs are truly just new things. Like if we decided we wanted to build some roads out in the area we're trying to develop, that would be a new thing. We'd have to start from scratch and put that through the federal processes. And so I think what the FAA is trying to get to is 3 years for operating costs, and then however long it takes to get a new development project through will be the final rule. But we don't know that for sure yet. Sure. And they could change it any day.
And the goal being, I would guess, is as we're going to be, correct me if I'm wrong, kind of competing against other Montana airports, if you will, or even in our region, even in Idaho and that, for when these flights start coming back. And the fact that we can keep those fees down, right, that, all things being equal,
Yeah.
we might get a nod before, as they start rolling. Is that correct?
I think that's right. I mean, I think what we're, so there's a lot in the soup right now, but I think the way I would phrase it is, in a few months, we're all going to be talking about what opportunities we can create for the airlines. What opportunities can we create for them to be profitable in a market? But there's a lot of competing factors in that. One thing that's out there, and I think I sent it around last week, is Senator Cantwell from Washington has proposed a bill that there's no middle seats and that you can't be sat next to an adjacent person. No middle seats drops you to 67% capacity on a 737. On a regional jet, no adjacent passenger gets you to 50% capacity. And so, that bill, it's a blunt force object, for markets like us. I mean, 50% capacity at a max is a very difficult, and Rich, I'm sure you probably have thoughts on that, but that would make the regional jet flying market nearly impossible if there isn't any subsidizing, I'm going to go with that, of those regional carriers. And so, when you look at the market, that's a tough one, and we don't know what's going to happen with that right now. And so, I think the best thing for small markets to do is get your costs as low as you can go, so that number one, you create opportunity for the airline to be profitable. You're making it easier. Now, we're only 6 to 8% of their total costs. Fuel is 3 or 4 times that, but fuel costs are also down. So they've got labor costs, which is probably their largest expense right now. So what we're trying to do is make it as cheap as possible, but then also get rid of all those things like debt service, which could throw us into a technical default if we're not able to service them. Those are, operating expenses we can cut. If we stop paying the landscaper doesn't really sue us. If we stop paying the janitorial contract, the janitor doesn't sue us or send us into collections. If we stop paying debt service, now we've got a major problem. And so if we don't think this is going to recover quickly, or even in the next 3 to 5 years, getting rid of that debt service is the keynote thing to do, so that we can get those low rates. We can propose to the airlines, look, we have done what you've asked. We're as cheap as we can possibly be. That's really what we're gunning for. And so, yes, I think you hit the nail right on the head. We want to come out of this as cheap as possible, creating the most opportunity. And the great thing about being cheap as possible at an activity level of that is, as that activity expands, we become proportionately cheaper, right? Because, if we can hold a $6 cost per employment with these activity levels, if that employment number doubles, which, over the next 5 years is what we're trying to do, then that cost per employment goes down proportionately. So, it sets us up really, really well to compete in the gaining back air service market. And right now, I think the interesting thing will be the leisure versus business push and pull. Initially the business will be slow to recover. Leisure will be probably much faster because people have been cooped up and they want to go. And so the narratives I'm seeing out in the market right now is there's going to be a boom of leisure traffic. Montana is set up well for that, and you're starting to even hear that on the national commentary. On CNBC, I heard the other day someone say, hey, I hear Yellowstone's opening up. And there might be a lot of people going to places like that this summer because they're afraid of Disneyland with a lot of touchable surfaces and people crammed in tight spaces, but they're not as afraid of open spaces where they're in their car primarily. That's as close as they get to anybody. And so, there might be a backswing that we'd see later this summer for Montana, and over the long haul, I think the tough part is, when does the business market come back? Once we get to August, how many companies are willing to send their people to training in Las Vegas or to a conference in New Orleans? How many professional training seminars for doctors are there going to be? When everybody's worried about being close together in a resurgence. And so that part of the market might be particularly sticky, getting that demand back. And so, that's the tough part. I think the airlines will be monitoring very closely those markets that are able to bring back their traffic faster. And I think Great Falls and even Montana, because we haven't had the significant COVID pressure of some of these other areas, we might well see opportunity faster than in New York, where there has been just tremendous public concern over that health issue. And so that's a really long answer, but I think what we're trying to position ourselves to do is be as cheap as possible, to continue to point to the airlines of what we can support, and really argue well for bringing back the capacity we've normally had. And pairing us with the other Montana markets is frankly not a bad way to start things. But if we have to get down to where the planes can only be 50% full, even that is not going to be effective in getting those flights back. So a lot of things really in motion. We have to figure out the tolerance for sitting next to someone on a plane. That's going to be an interesting one that we can't really affect well. And if there are rules that come over top and kind of punish the market for that situation that happens, then that's going to be hard for us to recover from. I mean, we would really at that point be struggling to try and find markets like a Salt Lake where we could maybe get one 737 a day, maybe one 737 to Denver, maybe Alaska, we'd probably have to pair up with Billings to fill a 737 a day. That would be the pitch that we'd have to switch to immediately and say, okay, let's call Billings and see what we can do together to pitch a 737 to save our service, that type of thing.
Well, and the good thing is you don't have to always go with the biggest 737. Literally a 700 that we fly United is only 124 people. So that's 2.5 RJs, which is not unrealistic to what we fly on a summer schedule.
And so as you think about that, for many years we've been trying to get 700s and 900s here because they have a first class cabin and it's more seats. But again, because of if we are going to go to nobody sitting next to you, or if there's public sentiment about sitting next to somebody, even those larger planes are ineffective. Now you're talking mainline service, and the very survival of the SkyWests and the Go Jets and all the guys that are flying those regional jets, it's going to be difficult. And so when that happens, you got to think about, now you're talking about total number of frames that are viable. You're talking about major market shifts in the number of small communities that can have air service at all.
So John, on Friday night, there was something that came out that a bunch of the airlines were going to be able to cut back flights to small and mid-sized cities. The United and Delta were, of course, mentioned. Are we beyond that impact then?
Well, we've already had the cutback. What they're struggling for now is whether they can keep their funding, through September, because they get that extra funding if they maintain air service. So they've been able to make the cuts they wanted to make in our market. What happens after September will be another cut of that, because now there isn't any government dollars on the table, and then we're back to free market economics. And so what works for them works, and what doesn't work for them doesn't work. What you're talking about is only temporary. It only gets you to September of what they're able to do, and they've already done it in our market largely. There may be, it could be Alaska decides our market doesn't work at all. Frankly, that's less likely because they certainly want to keep Billings, and right now they're sharing us with Billings in order to fill a flight. So, I think for right now, what we have is going to stick around. The question is, after September, then what? If demand doesn't recover quickly, then I think all bets are off. I've seen some articles that say we might be back to deregulation, or back to regulation, where you have, in a community like ours, you have one carrier, and that would have to be scrutinized somehow with a government program to say what the rates could and couldn't be. There's a lot of things that are going to happen between now and September if the demand does not recover, or if a regulatory ceiling comes in and says you can't sit next to anyone, you're going to have to go to whatever capacity reduction that requires.
I guess I just saw them mentioning like Lincoln, Nebraska, Kalamazoo, Michigan. They haven't lost the service yet. That's why I thought this was something new, that they were allowing more cutbacks. I just wondered. The only thing I understood clearly was there had to be some airline servicing the city.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the other question is too, the way that initial bill was structured was you have to have one flight into a region. But they didn't define what that meant. And so there was a lot of early question about, well, what do you mean by region? Is central Montana a region from Bozeman to Great Falls? Can you have one flight to that area and maintain your government funding? Or Michigan, like a Kalamazoo, I mean, there's several air service markets that overlap that within a 2-hour drive. And so that's been part of the struggle is in these markets like you're mentioning, Michigan and other ones where you have several airports in a region, what does that entail in terms of service? And so I think that's the clarity the airlines have been seeking and what you're seeing now. They're able to maintain what they're doing in Montana with these, what we used to call milk runs, is you're able to maintain service. It's not great. We certainly don't have as many seats, and there's actually been some oversolds in all of this. I mean, Denver's had several oversolds between us and Helena. And so, I mean, there's just a lot yet to be, just to be seen as to how fast demand recovers and what the appetite is for sitting next to somebody. I mean, those are two of the critical factors. And with that, any other questions on that vein? Rod, could you give us a construction update on where we are with our projects for the summer? You're probably muted, Rod, just so you know.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, for construction, right now, did a notice of award to MRTA for the road project, so that should start, we're hoping, probably mid-June, maybe a little bit later, but that's the road portion from the terminal around the FedEx and then some down on the south portion, so we'll be seeing some more activity on that, Chris Dodge and Seasville Mill and that, so, I think John mentioned they're starting to plan the icing pad. I haven't seen anything on that yet, but they're working on that. And then as far as the bathrooms, we've got Ruth H. Warner helping assist a little bit on that with some design kind of getting some fixtures replaced in there. So they're helping us with that. We've talked to them a little bit. That one's moving along. John mentioned the roof section. We did advertise that, so it started in paper Sunday, so we should be hearing from contractors on that here pretty soon to get that roof section replaced. There'll be 2 roof sections, one above the admin office and then a little section above that stairwell we're working right now. So, and in the stairwell we're kind of going old. That would have come on that, but we're looking at doing some additional work in there, some ducting to prevent that moisture from getting in there. Let's see, what else are we working on? Over at their National Guard, they're continuing with their apron project. There's a lot of work going on there, expanding that apron. So basically right now they've removed all the base material and putting in engineered fill base material now. We've got probably about 30 inches of that put in. So a lot of material moving in there now, and that is scheduled to be done by October. And then the ALZ lights, I think we're just waiting on signatures from their National Guard for the military cooperative construction agreement, MCCA, that we're doing partner with the Guard for that project. So that project hasn't started. We hope to see it start here in a few weeks. So Sage-Stone Hill will be helping on that as well. And then, Don mentioned Love's. I did meet with their construction manager last week, and so they're getting things pulled together. They figure they'll start here probably in a couple of weeks. So they've got a guy that's been on site and starting to get things going there. I think that's about it.
Quite a bit of work going on.
All right. The only other thing I'll mention is Maria's last day was Friday. She's retired, so we are looking for a financial accountant right now, a staff accountant. We're going to eliminate the assistant director of finance, assistant airport director of finance, and reduce that position down to a staff accountant level. And so we're out there looking for somebody right now. So,
Have we looked at any outsourcing options? If we don't find the right person, or way into, I don't know what she does on a day-to-day basis, and whether something like that could be.
I think I have seen airports that have used that function, used some temporary services and that type of thing. The biggest problem is there's a lot of attesting, because all of our grants and those type of things require a double, some type of double signature. Sure. And it'd be great to have somebody on board that could take that over. We also want to move to a different accounting system, or potentially maybe some new modules of Black Mountain. I've thought for some times that QuickBooks would be about the right size for somebody like us, rather than buying a more of an out-of-the-box product as opposed to a more expensive consultant type product. And so that's another thing. We'd really like to have that internal function to help us decide what the right fit is for us. And so we've gotten, we put it on Indeed, and we've gotten already a handful of folks that have some experience. So I think we'll find somebody. We'll see in the next couple of weeks what comes in. But so far I'm fairly encouraged that we've got definitely some people with some experience that are interested. So we haven't talked to anyone, but at least we're seeing some resumes. But
will there be any? I guess it depends, but it sounds like she'll be gone by the time the person comes on.
Yeah.
So there won't be a lot of transition. A lot of hands-on training when that conversion. Right.
No, there won't be. Alyssa's got a pretty good idea of how to operate most of our stuff. She helps out with the payables and the receivables, and even our banking functions. And then I've got a lot of overlap on the finance side to help with with that.
The thing I was thinking of is our fiscal year. There's a lot of things we do at the end of the year. Out. We missed it by a month of being able, or pretty close to a month, being able to get through that, which isn't obviously 6:30, but kind of into July, where you're buttoning up things and doing those year-end entries and things that person, hopefully you'll get somebody knowledgeable enough to be able to follow last year and say, we've got to do these 8-10 things before we're ready for audit. And I was going to say, one of the good things is we have continuity with the auditor. They'll be here now. Yes. We're going to pick, and good. So we'll probably help get some help from them. We may even have to pay a little extra for that to help us with the year-end entries and that type of thing. Because normally they start getting involved with us about that time anyhow. And so I think that would be something we could do that would be really helpful, is have them help us a little bit with some of those accruals and things at the year-end that to make sure we're doing it right. And especially if we can get somebody in the next month to help right at that end there, to get them involved in that so they can see that process, that would be great. But yeah, if we're not able to find somebody fairly quickly, we probably are going to have to, look to supplement for a while. And I know there are several folks in town that do that part-time. I know the chambers use some folks, and so I'm sure we could probably find somebody that could maybe help us a little bit. If it does take us 2-3 months to get somebody in, I think we probably can find that. And that's all I have on the director's report.
Excellent. Okay, before we get into the agenda items, the quick overall statement: are there any agenda items that are present a conflict of interest and consequently require any of our members to abstain from discussion and/or voting?
Does anyone have any issues? All right, Laura, I've got a head nod from everybody that no one has any issues and no one wants to abstain. So with that, let's start off with the O&M budget for fiscal year 2021.
Yes, thanks everybody. In your packet, you'll find the O&M budget for the upcoming year on the back there. And we'll kind of start with page 1 that gives us a good summary of the what we expect the year-end results to be, and then what we expect for this budget and versus last budget. Right off the top there, you can see on that operating revenue line, we expect quite a reduction in the amount of operating revenue, obviously. Last year, we budgeted $3.9 million. We actually think we'll end the year at $3.4 million because we lost the last quarter of activity on the passenger-related activities and the airline-related activities. But then we expect next year we'll probably be down to that 2.6 level, quite a bit of reduction there, 1.3 million in reduction over what we had budgeted this year. And that's made up of a number of things. We do expect our passenger-related activity to be about half what it was the year prior. Those things include parking and rental cars, food, all those things the passengers buy. We also expect the revenue from the airlines to be down dramatically. As I said before, our rates will be very similar because we're able to cut costs out of those rates. It's just an activity-related decline that will result in most of those declines. And so, should the activity pick up, we could do better, but we think it's prudent to not assume that. And so, we've got the operating budget down to, or the revenue budget down to about 2.6 million. As you can see, that'll approximately equal our operating budget for the year. And so we'll have about the same amount of income and expenses in the upcoming fiscal year. We've reduced the operating budget some. You can see on that page in summary, we expect this year to be about on budget at 2.7 million. Next year will be about $70,000 less than last year, 76,000 or so less than last year in our operating budget. A lot of those declines, we've included a salary freeze. Unfortunately, our benefit costs are going up. So we do have an increase in benefits costs, but we've reduced things like, for instance, our lawn care maintenance. We're going to reduce that contract and self-perform some of that over the summer, so we're able to take some costs out of that. We've held our marketing budget pretty much firm for several reasons. The first being we have that conference we're planning in September, which would come out of that budget, and so we likely will spend that. But if there is a recovery, a dramatic recovery, we want to be able to get the market back out into the public eye and try to encourage people to come up. So there's about $100,000 in that operating budget that we won't spend until next spring. Should we need more expense reduction, we have that $100,000 cushion that we can use to help offset those costs. And so that money, normally on a regular year, we would begin spending that around March. So we'll have a good 3 quarters in the book of next year before we would normally spend those dollars, and we can see if we need to spend those. So about $110,000 or so that we would normally spend on advertising, we'll hold in reserve to see what's happening. And so we do have some safety mechanisms built into that budget. And so that's the majority of the overview that we've got in there. And I'll flip through and show you a couple of things on the next page. Page 2 kind of gives you the revenue budget for the year. And as you can see on here, the landing fees that we're expecting to receive are down fairly dramatically from last year's budget. $523,000 was the budget for I say last year, the current year. We think we'll end up at around $400,000 because of that decline in activity. We might actually do a little better than that. But then next year we are expecting that to go down to $321,000. We're seeing these flights where we have the shuttle operation with the other airports doesn't really decrease our landing fees as much as it does our passenger activity because the plane still comes in and lands, and so we get a full landing fee. So the landing fees will actually hold up a little better than some of the passenger revenues. And that's what you see here, is it's not quite half of the activity we're expecting to go away, but it is a substantial portion, whereas the passenger revenues, when you get down into there, you'll see we're pretty much cutting those in half in the upcoming year. And so the landing fee is down to $321,000. That's what we're expecting for the upcoming year. As you get into the passenger-related activities under concessions here, you can see substantial declines. We were planning on $102,000 in food and beverage for next year. We now expect that to be about $42,000. News gift, about the same story, about $18,000 versus the 32 we budgeted the last year. The rental car mags, we expect to be about $300,000. That's down from $581,000. We're working with the rental cars right now to renegotiate those contracts. That contract, along with our parking contract, has a requirement that if our activity goes down by 30% in any given year, we are required to renegotiate those contracts with the rental cars. And so we're in the process of starting that now. We've sent some information out to the rental cars last week, and we've had a couple preliminary calls with the parking guys, and Laura and I are beginning to form up the mechanism for how we think we should restructure those contracts. So we do expect dramatic declines there. We're in the process of getting that together now. You see we've zeroed out the concession line. The concession line, what that is the way those rental cars contracts are structured is the rental car companies bid a minimum annual guaranteed revenue. And then they also have each contract 10% of revenue, and they pay us the greater of the two. And so oftentimes in the busy summer months, we receive 10% payments from a number of the busier rental car companies. And so if they're not going to exceed their minimum annual guarantee, then of course we wouldn't get anything. And we don't expect anyone will exceed those guarantees in the upcoming year. There just simply isn't enough revenue. And so we've zeroed that out. Going down to auto parking, you can kind of see the order of magnitude decrease we're showing in there. Just a little less than half of what we had budgeted for the upcoming year, 891, or for the current year of 891. We're now going to anticipate about $381,000 there in revenue. And we'll be talking to the parking lot operator. That contract is approaching its final year, and so kind of all options are on the table. We've mentioned to them that possibly we'd be willing to go to an automated, in fact they already are, an automated only staffing model during the non-peak times. So right now if you're here overnight, they're just going out the auto lanes. If there's an issue, they hit the intercom button and it dials the manager's cell phone, and then he tries his best to figure that out that way. And so we may go to that staffing model for the foreseeable future. There's a possibility we might determine that it's best to take over that operation and come back to the board with some plan for how we would begin operating that lot. We might in our discussions with Republic come back to the board and say we need to give them a couple more years. The way that contract is structured right now, at the end of the contract, we owe them the buyout on the remodel that was done a few years ago. I believe that's just under $300,000. When we built the new toll plaza and we brought in all that new equipment out there. There is a buyout portion. What normally happens is when you write your RFP for a new operator, you just tell them you will absorb $300,000, and then they propose based on that. That's a normal transition. Obviously, this is anything but normal. We'll keep all options open as we get into the upcoming fiscal year and renegotiating that contract. Looking down through the space rents, obviously the space rents don't change as dramatically as does anything else. The reduction in airline space rent that you see there is as we're reducing the rates that we're charging the airlines because we're pulling out debt service. We're paying off debt service. We're pulling out things like the tank farm remediation and paying for that with CARE dollars. That lowers the rate that we can receive from the airlines, and so you can see those airline space rentals there. That's more of a function of a lower rate going forward. They pay a little bit less there. The per turn revenue, that's going to be fairly consistent. We're not really sure where we'll set that rate yet. That's we can reset that rate every year with the airlines, and so we're trying to fine tune the what that rate will be for Allegiant going forward, but we expect less activity. So you can see there we've got about half the revenue coming in. Their activity might actually surprise us. That's the one airline I see rebuilding their schedule very quickly because they don't have a connecting schedule. They don't have a hub to rebuild. They just simply rebuild their activity as it gets responded to. You may have seen a couple weeks ago I reported that up in Canada, Air Canada has determined not to come into Lethbridge any longer, and so they'll be down to just WestJet traffic. And so, there might be some opportunity as things get back to normal. I see Las Vegas is reopening even this week. There might be some opportunity there to see traffic rebuild quickly on Allegiant. So that's one where we budgeted low, and I'm hoping for good things. Not a huge revenue source for us, but obviously those passengers buy drinks, they buy food, they park the car, they do all the things we like passengers to do. And so if we can rebuild that quickly, that would be great. And then you can see down in the next set of activity called miscellaneous. That's where a lot of our leasing activity takes place. That doesn't really change from year to year a great deal. It's not activity-based. It really has very little to do with the passengers. And so most of those revenue sources are going to be pretty consistent from year to year. We don't expect much change in that entire group of activity. You do see down there the loading bridge fees are going to come down quite a bit. That's because, again, we're buying back that loading bridge that we were amortizing to the airlines. And so we'll repay ourselves out of care funds. We'll no longer charge the airlines for that. And again, that's just an attempt for us to get a little cheaper going forward so that the airlines have less of a burden on remaining passengers. Down in the other revenue, again, not much of a change in there. These are primarily utilities reimbursements, the security reimbursement we receive from the FAA for our law enforcement officers. Those revenues don't change much. About 2.6 million expected in revenue, as I said earlier. A pretty dramatic decrease from last year.
Real quick, on your
Yeah.
landing fees,
Mhm.
is that a new rate that you're proposing going forward, or has that been negotiated, or what are you thinking on the landing fees?
That's a calculation. So, that rate gets calculated, kind of as I said earlier, we pile in our needs, we deduct out the other revenues that we receive, and what's left is then divided by your landed weight. And so the landing fee projected for next year is well under what we have this year. I think it's right around $1 per 1,000-pound unit. And this year we were at about $1.35, I think it was, $1.35 per 1,000-pound unit. So the landing fee is coming down pretty significantly. Now, if activity tracks worse than we're projecting, that will go back up. But we've got a lot of cushion in there. First of all, because FedEx is half of our landed weight. So, I mean, obviously that half of it, we get basically one flight a day from their fleet. There's not a whole lot of levers to pull for that to change, because they don't have smaller planes. So we think that's a pretty firm number. If the passenger activity tracks down more, the landing fee at the end of the year will creep up. So the way that all works is we budget, we charge them based on the budget, and then after we get the audit, usually right around the first of the year, we do what we call reconciliation, where we go back through the audit and we true up the budget to the audit, recalculate the rate, and then we either send them a check or they send us a check based on actual results. And that's a traditional airport model of how it's normally done. And so, yeah, I think the landing fee will be lower throughout the year. At the end of the year, we'll know what the real landing fee was. But I think we've got a pretty conservative approach to it.
So you still have Frontier on here? Obviously, no.
We leave that in the budget as in the event that they would come back.
Any chance out of the ashes of them?
What's that?
Any chances out of the ashes when this is all?
I think so. I think Allegiance, Frontiers, and those guys, because they have less things to rebuild, it's easier for them to see an opportunity. And so when you look at a market, Brand X airport, and this is really what we've seen in our region, the Northwest, and even really in the West, is the airlines were expanding pretty rapidly, and so markets where Frontier's model initially was, hey, we want to go connect these cities to places they don't have service to, all of a sudden there was airports where service was piled on top of that. And so, you might have a Frontier and 2 other airlines serving a market. Those yields are going to get real thin, because now everyone's going to have to be cheap to incite the market. And so, I think when Frontier and the Allegiance of the world step back from that and do what they do, which is find new opportunity, markets like us with very low costs and some demand that's not being met, especially if the airlines are slow to rebuild our traffic, with normal hub traffic, I think that's where we have opportunities. And so we definitely want to keep the conversation open with Frontier. My hope is and I don't know this, but we'll have to visit with them. The Tourism Business Improvement District had a nice incentive that they had put forth, and I'm hoping we can still recover that for next year. Obviously, their revenues are down, but I'm hoping we can still recover that for the upcoming year. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for them to be looking at an airport that might all of a sudden have spiking rates that are pinching those yields. I mean, Frontier would tell you, and they have told us in the past, their profits on a flight can sometimes be 1 or 2 people. That's the whole profit for the flight. And so, with our costs being down, if we have demand that's not met, I think that's where we can, potentially outperform, the mess that we've got going here with the traffic being down by getting a new airline in. And so, yeah, we definitely want to keep talking to those guys. We definitely want to keep talking to Allegiant. We are, talking to them about, hey, don't, rule us out for new markets, because we're pretty confident that demand's going to spring back quickly in Great Falls, and we're going to have great rates, so.
I think it's a huge opportunity, because it's obviously more leisure.
Yep.
And we're just not going to get all this back
Yep.
in the short. I don't think, I'm just talking as a business person
Yeah.
who uses a lot of this. I'm looking at it going, this isn't good for business people in Great Falls that travel a lot. We're going to have to reorganize how we do business in some cases. But some of these, I think, definitely.
Yeah, and I think, and we'll have to look at, opportunity a little differently for a while, I think, where, if we can get, direct service to LA, on anyone, that would be huge, and a real opportunity for our community. And so, that probably springs right to the top of the types of things we need to try and do. And so, I think, again, why we're cutting the debt service out and trying to pull out some of these costs for projects normally the airlines would pay for. The reason for that is we want to be sustainable going forward. When every airline look at us and say, well, they're going to, not only are they going to be cheap now, they're going to be cheaper 3-4 years down the road. And we really don't have any major plans that are going to keep us from doing that. So that's what I'm encouraged by is, we were already planning to get this debt done in the next few years, and now we're going to do it a little sooner under terrible circumstances. But I think it sets a good base for growing in the next few years.
Well, if the empty middle seat rule goes into effect and
Well,
the
that's
50-seat RJs goes away, there won't be enough mainline airplane to cover these little airports where Frontier going direct to Denver, that'd be a perfect niche model for them, because at 67%, they can make money where United mainline may not be able to.
Right, and I'll take that even a step further. Frontier, Allegiant, some of those other guys have cut their teeth on markets that are only served 3 or 4 times a week. Whereas it's very difficult for a United to do that in a Denver hub. And maybe that is the model going forward. Maybe sharing becomes, Great Falls has service Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday to Seattle, and Billings has Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or maybe that is how it evolves. But as Vince said, if it comes down to we can't fly 50-seat equipment economically anymore, then we're going to have to think about air service like maybe we have a flight to Los Angeles and a flight to Denver, and on a large low-cost carrier that does that a couple times a week, and that's what we have. For a while, until the mainline carriers can readjust those models, or until we're comfortable sitting next to somebody. We've got to keep all those potential realities in focus.
Anything ever become of that? I think it was in January you told us about that brand new airline that
Yeah, I was
was
going to ask
filing
about
paperwork.
that too.
I haven't heard anything.
They're gone.
Yeah. And they were built around a 2x2 airline or 2x2 frame. Which again, until we know, how comfortable people are sitting next to somebody is tough. But I am encouraged. We've all seen the pictures over the weekends. People are, having, major get-togethers, and there's social distancing's maybe being challenged a little, but we aren't seeing the big outbreaks. So maybe, a month or so down the road, maybe that fear of the 50-seat jet not being practical, maybe that will evaporate. I just can't say.
All right, carry on, sorry. We digress.
Yeah, over to the expense budget, sorry. On page 3, you can see a high-level summary of the expense budget for the year. We're budgeting the same amount of salaries expense as we had in the current budget, more or less, and so that's not expected to change. We've notified the employees that we won't be doing a salary action this year. And what we don't know is obviously there's the overtime budget's anyone's guess. This winter wasn't particularly bad on that budget. The year prior was awful. So depending on how much snow we get in the upcoming year, we'll know if we can hold it to that. That's always a variable. On the benefits side, you can see, as I said earlier, there is a small increase in the health insurance there. I say small, relative to the last few years, it's fairly small, but it's still expected to go up. And so we've got a little bit of extra benefits costs in there. We are reducing that a little bit with the reduction in force that we have right now. So we may have a month relief next year unless we get somebody hired pretty quickly. So we'll know more there. On the utilities side, we don't expect any real changes there. Obviously, the gas is dependent on temperatures, but for the most part, we've kind of zeroed in on those electric budgets the last few years. And some of you may recall even back, even a few years ago, that used to be a $350,000 line item, but the switch to LED lighting has really realized some savings there. And we'll be taking down about a half of the remaining incandescent bulbs on the road project this summer and replacing those with LEDs too. And I think my guys, the time savings is really their major benefit from it. We just don't touch those bulbs like we used to. I think we've replaced one of the bulbs in the main upstairs here since we went to LEDs, and that used to be that we used to have a whole season dedicated to that every fall where we replace those bulbs. Good problem to have there. On the rest of this, the operating supplies, there's not a whole lot we can change there. We have to do some weed spraying, obviously, because we can get the invasive weeds up here, and so we need to kind of hold to that. Cleaning janitorial products there in the operating supplies, we don't want to skimp on that right now. Obviously, that's heading the wrong direction. Uniforms and those types of things are pretty standard. Not a lot of opportunity there for savings. Equipment and supplies, Rod and I worked to try and see what we could pull out of there, and so he's tried to reduce some on what he plans to buy in the next year in terms of equipment. We're expecting some fuel savings given that the fuel cost is down a little bit over the year prior. Again, winter can really ruin that pretty quickly if we don't get a cooperative winter. We are having to buy a little bit of paints and chemicals this year. As I told the budget committee, over the last 3 or 4 years, we've had a capital project that included painting in the airfield. Think back to runway 17 getting remilled and overlaid. Obviously, you painted after that. Last year, we fog sealed. Obviously, you painted after that. So we've had a nice reprieve the last 3 or 4 years from buying as much paint as we would normally buy. This year, we've kind of got to get out there and do our own painting again. And so we've had to increase that pretty substantially. And so that's just a volume thing of maintaining the airfield paints. Professional services, we are seeing some reduction in there on the marketing. As I said before, we've kind of reduced that some, expecting we won't do a fall season. Normally in the fall, we would do a little Canadian advertising. Around the holidays, we might do a little bit of advertising to encourage people to book. We're probably going to skip that campaign this fall. We did want to cut it dramatically because we do need a little money in there to run this conference. And then we'll have, we think, about $100,000 coming in the spring that, depending on the recovery, we may or may not spend. Obviously, if we did get a new flight, we'd want to put some marketing behind that. And there's always the possibility, if activity is looking good and we have to do a few marketing things, we could come back to the board and ask for that variance to recover some of those dollars, which we've done in the past also. Repairs and maintenance, not a lot of change there. Unfortunately, every year we break snow equipment during snow season, and you don't know what, but you know it's going to break. So it's a cost we have. The jet bridges there, we haven't done that in a couple years. We'll probably save either the year, depending on when they come to Montana. We get on the we get on the swing when they come through with usually Helena and one other airport, I think it's Kalispell. When that company comes up to do the major maintenance on the bridges, we ask them to stop in Great Falls, and we pay them to go through the bridges with a fine-tooth comb and replace the bits and pieces. We'll either do that yet this fiscal year, or we'll do it next. We don't know when they're going to come through yet, but one way or the other, we'll probably save one of those $9,200 charges, either next year's budget, this year's budget, depending on when they schedule the Montana swing. Of course, with COVID, it may well be in next year, but we won't spend it twice, though, I can say that. And then down in the other expenses, the customs building we pay, as somebody asked the question a while back, we have to provide customs a free building to have them here, and we pay Holman Aviation for that, and so that's kind of a fixed item. Most of these are fairly fixed items, not a lot of change there, but we end up the year with a budget that's about $2.69 million, a little bit less than we had last year, and we're pretty confident we can hold to that. Any questions on the operating budget? I won't go through the remainder of the schedules. The next couple schedules, what we're doing there is dividing everything into cost center allocations. That's the airline's rates and charges, part of the budget they care about. It's how those expenses get allocated to cost centers. And then if you look on in the back here, you'll see these sideways tables. These are our rate setting tables. So this is the calculations we use pursuant to the airline lease that we've negotiated in order to set their actual airline rates. And so that shows the airlines how we plan to set the rate for the year.
All right. Any comments from the budget committee? Casey, Rich, Tony, do you guys have any comments you want to bring up about your thoughts?
Yeah, this is Tony. Yeah, we met with John. We went through it pretty well, and obviously there's a lot of uncertainty in the future, but I think what John's done is put together a pretty conservative approach. And I think given what's going on, I don't think it's going to get much worse. And hopefully if things trend the way they're starting to, it might even turn out a bit better than what he's projecting. But obviously we can't tell. I mean, we could end up with a huge second wave next winter, and it's all apart. We have no idea when we get a virus vaccine in September, and things could turn well in January. So we have no idea, but I think he's done a good job putting together a budget that's workable under the current circumstances.
Excellent. Casey?
Yeah, we had a real thorough meeting, went through the whole budget line by line. I think John's got a good plan. They've obviously put a lot of thought into it. And like Tony said, I think it's on the conservative side. So I think it's a solid plan.
Rich? Yeah, I agree. It was a very informative meeting for me being the first one, but yeah, it's a pretty good plan.
Sounds good. All right.
I thought there should be a few more tables and schedules, right?
You only took 20 minutes to go through the whole budget, I'm sure. Okay. With that, can I get a motion to accept the O&M budget for fiscal year 2021 as briefed? Okay, so I've got a motion from Tony to accept the O&M budget for fiscal year 2021 as briefed. A second?
I'll second.
And a second from Deb. Any discussion, any further discussion regarding the 2021 O&M budget? All right, with no further discussion, let's call for a vote. All in favor of accepting the operating and management budget for fiscal year 2021, say in favor with an aye. 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 Any opposed with a nay? All right, Laura, I have unanimous approval for the operating and management budget 2021. One down, 3 to go. Let's go with number 2, task order 27 for the Mang Runway ALZ Lighting Construction Management Project.
Yeah, as we talked about last month, the 1735 runway rehabilitation included installation of cans and conduits for an assault landing zone lighting system for Montana National Guard. This system will allow the pilot to turn on and turn off the special box and one configuration that they use during training. It'll also allow the tower to affect that same change out on the airfield. Oftentimes they turn off the lights or normal lighting completely, and they use an infrared lighting that they're able to see with the current mobile system that's out there. That mobile system requires quite a bit of setup time. It also introduces the possibility of FOD out into the airfield because it's foreign objects themselves that are attached out there during those operations. And so this will save them quite a bit of man time, really prevents them from having to have someone out in the field, actually at the landing field during these exercises, because the pilot will be able to change the system on and off in the cockpit. It does require quite a bit of trenching. We wanted to get everything in the pavement that would require a destruction of pavement to get in there back during the runway project, and Mang was very gracious to take us up on that and fund the installation of those materials back during that runway rehabilitation. So now all we have to do is go out and basically pick up where we left off and install the lights themselves, trench that back to a power source, and install all the software and hardware it takes to affect that system. Mang has asked us to manage that for them over the summer. They've got their hands full with that ramp lighting, and then you've got all the badging requirements that require to be out in the airfield and the operational awareness of being out in the airfield to monitor this construction. Since we have an on-site construction manager during this summer, we'll be working on the roadway project. He'll already be badged. He's worked in the field on our airport many times, including the fog seal last year. So that's some training that doesn't have to happen. And so what Mang asked us to do is go ahead and manage this. In order to do that, we need to execute a task order off of our engineering contract so that they can have that construction management and oversight service from Jacobs Engineering. And so we want to execute task order 27 here. It's a no-cost airport expense. We're not going to be directly paying for the costs of that task order. We are going to charge Mang a $5,000 fee in order to provide oversight. Rod will be attending the construction meetings. If we happen to hit a problem, I'll be attending the construction meetings out there to try and resolve any problems in the field. And so we're going to charge them a little bit of administrative oversight, $5,000, but the rest of this task order would be funded directly by Mang for the construction oversight of those ALZ lights.
Okay. Can I get a motion to accept task order 27 for construction of the management of the Mang Assault Light landing zone lights at no cost to the airport?
We also want to include in there the charge of $5,000.
Oh, and the staff and charging $5,000 for staff oversight of the construction project.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve task order 27 for no cost and include a $5,000 charge to Mang for staff oversight.
Perfect. We have a motion, Laura, from Casey. Do I have a second? Okay. We have a second from Rich. Any discussion? Any comments from the expert in the field?
I am excited to land on it.
All right,
Huge benefit to the Guard. So
I have a motion and a second for task order 27. No further discussion. All in favor of accepting the task order 27 as previously stated, say with aye.
Aye.
All opposed with a nay. And we have no nays. It passes unanimously. All right. Let's move on to capital project bathroom update, construction and sanitizer stations.
Yes, we want to go in and refresh the bathrooms. Several years ago when we put together the terminal refresh, we had always intended on addressing the bathrooms that were not addressed during the 2014 remodel. The only restroom banks that were addressed during that project are the new ones that were in the space next to the Bear out in the lobby, the pre-security bathrooms. The post-security bathrooms, all we did was close in the wall on the pre-secure side and punch through the exterior wall on the external side and drywall that so that we had a new entrance into those bathrooms. And so we want to go in and hit those bathrooms. There's actually several sets of them. We want to do the post-security restrooms. We want to do the bathrooms in bag claim. We want to do the restrooms outside the door here, and there's another set on the third floor. If there's enough funds, we would also do the staff bathrooms in the administrative office and get all those renovated. And so The restrooms that we envision going forward are much like the ones we built in 2014. We want to go with the easy clean counter that actually just has a floating space, so there's not a backsplash to catch material. We want to go with a material that is easy to clean and stays sanitary. We want to replace the current drywall and tile system with something that goes up to about a foot of the ceiling, so that we can actually mop the walls and spray the walls easier. Right now we have drywall after about chest high all the way up, and if you go into those bathrooms you can see they're stained, they're hard to clean. We can't always use the sanitizers on them that we'd like to use. The tiles in those bathrooms during the style when they were built back in 2003 is large grout line. And we want to go to small grout line and a tile that has less, I want to say staining to it, but if you look at that tile, it's meant to look worn like a slate, and so it looks dirty. Even the new stuff we've put over in the renovated area in the entryway to that bathroom just has that kind of patina look to it. We want to go with something that's probably a plank flooring so that you don't see a grout line grid, which makes it look cleaner. We want to go to an epoxy grout that you can use a sanitizer on, a heavy sanitizer on, without staining it or discoloring the grout. That's one of the other problems we've got, is some of the cleaners we've tried over the years has contributed to some of the staining of that grout. And we want to go with an epoxy grout that's impervious to that type of staining. All of the facilities in the bathroom, we want to go to touch-free. Right now we have some touch-free that was retrofitted in 2003, but it's battery operated and they go dead, and then the toilet doesn't flush and people have to manually flush them. And so we want to replace that with hardwired touch-free. And we want to go to the hand dryer stations where the towel is integrated into the trash can like we have in the new bathroom here. What we're finding on the post-security side is that it's not an auto-feed towel, and then when people grab it, they pull pieces of the towel off and drop it on the floor. And so even after the bathroom's been cleaned, 15 people later, we've got a pile of paper all over the floor that makes it look dirty. And so those are the types of things we've gone through and methodically inventoried each of those conditions that make the bathroom look dirty or make it hard to clean, and we're proposing changes to each one of those to make it both easier to clean, more sanitary, and more appealing. And so the other thing we want to do, and we've had a few pastor comments about this, there's a dressing room behind the current women's bathroom that we lost during the remodel. When you used to come into the bathroom, you could go to the far end of the bathroom and circle back, and there's a mirror back there in a hallway, which women used as a nursing station or just a makeup station in there. We want to reclaim that. We've developed a plan where we can simply just go through a drywall partition that we put in during the remodel to access that area again, so that women will have that makeup area, or if they want to nurse a child in there, we'll have a space for them to do that. And so we'll be reclaiming that back into the women's bathroom, which enlarges it some on the post-security side. That's a question we get fairly often. If we have a private space for nursing, we will again have a private space for nursing off the main bathroom. You actually don't even have to walk through the bathroom to get to it. You'll come into the women's bathroom and it'll be to your left and you can go in there. And so these are improvements we think are timely, given that as folks come back to the airport and begin to travel again, we want them to feel like cleanliness is a major issue for us. These bathrooms, like I said, are nearly 20 years old now. And so it is time to hit them again. And we think we'll do this through a design-build type of structure. As Rod said earlier, we've used the RuPage Warner to help us inventory the conditions we want to change. For instance, take out wall tile, reinstall wall tile, take out toilet, install toilet. But then the specifications of those toilets, flush, gallons per flush, the hardwired auto flushes as opposed to the battery powered, what type of hand dryer we want. We've asked them to research on the automated hand dryers, the Dysons, what's the most sanitary version we can get, so that we can put in an automated hand drying that is, will be appealing to folks. We want to change the lighting in most of those bathrooms. We didn't address the lighting when we did the 2014 remodel. And so we want to go to LED lights and more lighting. Several of those bathrooms are kind of cavish. We want to get rid of that. Those are the kinds of conditions we're looking to change. In addition, once this is approved, Rod will be again looking for some sanitary sanitizer dispenser stations that we can put out in the building. We want to include that in this too, so that we can acquire some mobile stations. My edict to him was, find me some that we can refill with sanitizer from any source. Because most of the vendor ones that you get require you to buy their pouch of sanitizer solution, which becomes very hard to find. And so what we want is something where if we have to, we can refill it ourselves from a drum of sanitizer. We can actually acquire drums of sanitizer right now, but it's very difficult to get some of the custom pouches that fit in some of these machines. So we want mobile sanitizer stations that we can begin to deploy throughout the building, which have multiple sources of refilling, that we can assure passengers that they have that hand sanitizer throughout the building. And so we're going to acquire about a half dozen of those to disperse pre and post security, so that we have those for folks, and make them refillable from practically any source. And so that's the project. We're doing, as I said, design build, so we do not have a design spec this time. So the project estimating is Rod and I both trying to inventory what we think it's going to cost to get these done. Obviously, if we will flux in the number of bathrooms we do based on this budget. This will be funded through the CARES dollars. If we can't quite get to the last set of bathrooms, we'll either leave out the third floor ones, or we'll leave out the ones in the boardroom or the admin office to get us to that budget. But we're hoping that we can get all the remaining bathrooms done. And so with that, I'd like to recommend to the board that you approve the renovation of the bathrooms not to exceed $500,000.
Just my count with that is we're looking at remodeling between 10 and 14 bathrooms and adding a ladies nursing / makeup station. So if we divide that out by a dozen, we're looking at less than between 30 and 35,000 per bathroom.
So there's 5 banks of 2, so 10 bathrooms plus the nursing station and then the sanitizer stations.
So we're looking a little less than 50,000 each. So that's a more realistic number.
Yeah, 100,000. I mean, you can see the bigger airports. 100,000 is a decent planning number. I know Denver a few years ago spent $1 million per bank, so that's 500,000 per bathroom. And so I mean they're not inexpensive.
True.
And we plan all new stainless steel dividers and everything. I mean, they'll be taken to the walls and then rebuild it.
So if it comes in under 500,000, does CARE take that back, or do we keep that money to do something else?
No, it'll just go back into our $8,000 surplus that we're already projecting, and we'd use it for something else.
General time frame? When we plan to get
We're hoping to get the advertising on the street in the next month and start work maybe even in July.
So maybe by the calendar year?
Yes, our ideal solution would be have this done by Thanksgiving.
Oh.
Because we're kind of targeting that as, hey, maybe people will feel comfortable going to their family's house, by Thanksgiving.
I think if the economy's going to bounce, that's when it's going to bounce, is
Yeah.
for that Thanksgiving, Christmas season.
Yeah.
You mentioned LPW. Are they contracted to design the bathrooms then?
Not design it, no. This will be a design build. So we'll go to the contractors and ask them, what we're asking LPW to do is give us a class of tile, give us a class of epoxy grout, so it'll be, this standard of tile or better. And so then we'll go out to the contractors, because really it's a renovation more than anything. And they'll propose to us a tile palette. You're going to get Dowlite, this grade, here are the 5 colors, and then Rod and I and some other folks in the admin office will sit down with that palette and say, okay, this floor tile, this wall tile, type of things. So that's basically what LPW is doing is, give us a Dyson this or better. Give us a toilet this many gallons per minute, or better. Like that.
The only reason I asked is my daughter's an architect with LPW,
Oh.
so I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
I wasn't getting in the area.
Yeah, they have a small task order. Rod, do you remember what that dollar amount was? It was $1,700 is my recollection.
It's, I think a not to exceed $1,750. those?
Oh, yeah. Not to exceed $750. So we did a small task order with them to just put the specs together for us. And it'll require more work on our end to select, you know, the what we call value. You know, have to be, this person has a, you know, is proposing a better floor tiling, might be a little bit more, but, you know, we like that proposal better than we like this other one, type of thing.
That may be a good project for anybody that has any design skills on the board that wants to participate in bathroom design.
Let me send my.
Not me.
Let me send my wife up.
I was gonna say, consult a woman for the dressing area, you know, yeah.
All right, well, I'll start it off with the motion to accept the bathroom update sanitizer station project at a cost not to exceed $500,000. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. I have a motion from me, Laura, and a second from Deb to accept the bathroom update project. All in favor of accepting with aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks, Tony. Do we have a question from the, oh, go ahead. Commissioner.
Just letting you know I haven't fallen asleep.
No, we knew that.
On the issue of the nursing station, I've heard it variously described as a nursing station / makeup place, and I don't view those activities as mutually compatible. And one way to make sure that it's a nursing station and that you don't have to fight for it is not to put a mirror in there. But I'm not an expert on that, and it would be good to research that, because I think there is a real demand for a nursing station, and there are mirrors all over the place that somebody can put makeup on. So I hope you'll look into whether those two activities really are compatible, or whether a nursing station really needs a different kind of ambiance than a multi-purpose place where women can go.
Okay, great. Thanks for the input. Appreciate it, Commissioner Moe. And so noted for John.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely take a look at that.
All right, Laura, we have the bathroom update is accepted unanimously. Let's move on to task order, or excuse me, agenda number 4, the emergency repair, emergency terminal repair for the front stairwell.
Yes, and this was approved by the board several months ago. We're bringing it back to the board. As the contractor pulled down the ceiling from the stairwell, what we saw up there, I think somewhat surprised us. The way the vent system works is there's an air intake on the windboard side, and then the stairwell is just open. And then on the opposite side, there's a hole in the brick where the wind blows through and gets sucked down into the basement into the air handler. And so across the floor, essentially, of that air intake is just drywall. And so because there's louvers on the air intake, the rain, for the most part, isn't an issue. But what's happening, we think, is when the snow is wet enough to accumulate enough moisture, yet still light enough, it can be sucked into the intake. Snow's being sucked into that intake and sits on top of that drywall and melts. And so then we had the drywall kind of caved in a few months ago and caused some damage in that hallway. There's also a sprinkler line that goes across that same area, so we have to do a little bit of climate control in there to avoid a bust of the line, which would cause further damage. And so as Rod and I were looking at this the last couple of weeks, and Rod took it a step further and talked to a couple mechanical folks. Their idea is to basically extend metal, sheet metal across the bridge in order to create an enclosed air intake, so that from the louvers all the way to the exposed side of the brick, there's some enclosure for that air to be sucked in and hopefully avoid that moisture accumulation on the sheetrock. We think will fix the issue. And so what we're doing essentially is increasing the scope of the project to do a little more sheet metal work than what we'd anticipated. We think that's going to cost about $5,000 extra. And so what we'd like to do is amend the approved budget of $10,000 and increase that to $15,000 and use that additional $5,000 to install that additional ductwork for the air intake. And so that's what we're proposing, is an increase in the scope of the project and the cost not to exceed $15,000. We'll also be paying for this with the CARES dollars as part of our CARES operating costs portion.
All right, I'll see if I can verbalize it properly. Can I get a motion to accept the emergency terminal repairs of the front stairwell to increase the budget by $5,000, not to exceed $15,000?
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Deb has moved. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Casey has seconded the motion. Any further discussion? All right, with the motion and a second, no further discussion. All in favor of accepting the emergency terminal repair front stairwell, state so by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay? All right, the terminal repair passes unanimously. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, you've got work cut out for you. Okay, with that, let's start off with Airport Authority Board comments. Commissioner Gibbs, any comments?
Not at this time.
Commissioner Evans? Okay. Commissioner Lalonde?
No, sir.
Commissioner Timbo?
Just a good job on the budget and putting together this information to use the CARES Act and keep our options open. So we, like you said, there's more to come.
Yeah.
And we don't want to tie ourselves down. So I think you did a good job, and I know that took a lot of time. So appreciate that.
Good.
In the budget committee.
All right. Commissioner Aritz? Any? Okay. Commissioner Smith? Are you still out there, Dave? Any additional comments? I think you're on mute.
It's not.
Oh, now he's on.
If you can hear me.
Now we hear you. Copy, no additional comments.
Man, they just went blank.
All right, we copy no additional comments, and I have no additional comments. So with that, any additional public comments to come in front of the board for the board meeting agenda? Okay, I have no additional comments. With no further business to come before the board, I declare this meeting adjourned. How about we take a 5-minute quick break, and then we will return for a quick work session agenda. We'll be back here at 50:50.